Starting now. Okay, so that's recording now. So thanks everybody for joining our first show and tell. We are the website redevelopment team. We're really excited about showing you what we've been up to. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this. Let me get on to next slide. There we go. So we're going to very quickly just give you an introduction of who we are. We're going to then touch on what we've been doing in discovery, and then we're going to start laying out some of our findings that we've found so far, and then we've got Q&A at the end. Yeah, so who are we? We're the website redevelopment team, yeah, glad that we're able to speak to you all today. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining. We have been tasked with improving the CDPS website. So what we like to do is we like to. I love that Josh's moves as well. Hopefully you've been able to spot that. So we're all able to draw a very quick picture of ourselves. So this is us. I'm not going to get everybody at CDPS to introduce themselves because you probably know most of them already. But I am just going to ask Hoffi if they're able to introduce themselves. So Carwyn, are you able to just say who you are?
Yes. Hello, everyone. So my name's Carwyn, and I'm creative director here at Hoffi. So yeah, so I'm going to be, well, I've been working on the user side of things with Julian up until now, and I've also been doing some external user research calls in Welsh with some people the past week, which has been interesting as well.
And Julian?
Hi, I'm Julian. I'm Brands Director at Hoffi. I've been helping with the initial workshops that we're going to kind of take you through the findings of later on in the presentation. My other two colleagues, Ali is actually currently on an actual call with one of the users of the CDPS website, so she can't be here today. And unfortunately, Ryan's got an emergency, so he's not here either. But yeah, we've kind of been working in collaboration with CDPS, and ultimately we will be developing and designing the site at the end of this research phase. So good to meet you all, for all the people I haven't met before.
Thanks, Julian. Okay. Sorry, I'm clicking the move on button and it doesn't seem to work this time. There we go. I'm just going to pass over to Charlotte, if that's okay, to go through the next slide.
Yeah. So in discovery, so our discovery is about understanding a problem before trying to solve it. It includes learning about your users and what they want to do, what constraints we might be facing, and the opportunities that we have to improve how things are currently working. So yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so as a team, we agree that we would be working in the open from the very start of the project, which also aligns with our digital service standards. We've created a Notion site, which is acting as an in-depth project wiki, where we are documenting our progress, our learnings, keeping track of our week notes and our next steps. It allows people to follow along with our progress and see a full agile delivery from start to end. And we'll also be publishing blog posts as well in the near future. I'm going to hand to Ed now.
Thank you, Charlotte. So you can see the problem on the screen there, so I'm not going to read that out, but a little bit of background. I've been in post for just over a year now, so I joined Charlotte and Gemma as almost the founding comms members of CDPS. And we inherited the site that we currently have. So we spent the first 6 months almost troubleshooting, looking at how we could do some reconfiguration, looking at how we could set up the analytics in a way that would be more meaningful, tweaking, and basically just making changes based on the things that we knew weren't working very well. But as Boys to Men have sang, we have come to the end of the road with the tweaks that we're able to do. We're also a growing and maturing organisation, and the website certainly wasn't fit for purpose for what we currently need to do, and it certainly isn't fit for purpose for what we needed to do in the future as we grow and mature. So what did we do? Next slide, please. We set up a multidisciplinary team. You can see who we all are and what our roles are there in front of you. Just to say the importance of this, obviously aligned with the digital service standards, being that you set up a multidisciplinary team and you bring in the relevant skills as and when is needed. The people who aren't on here are obviously the experts in Hoffy, and we were absolutely delighted to be able to award the contract to a Welsh organisation who live and breathe user-centred design principles as well. So that's our project team. I'm going to hand to James now, I think.
Thank you. Next steps were we created a foundation paper. It records the what, the why, the who, the when, and on the screen here you can actually see the foundation paper that we then copied up onto our wiki site. So it's all public, it's all there for everybody to read. The reason for creating a foundation paper is that you actually then, your scope is then written down. So it's something that you can all point to. It's something to help people understand why we're doing the work. And it's also got a very high level timeline of roughly when the work will complete. And I will hand over to Josh.
Thank you, James. So following that, we obviously needed to get some data. So we rapidly checked our problem statement against real users with a short bilingual survey. Obviously, only English is on the screen there. This was focused on the website itself, so the actual nuts and bolts of it, but also aimed at getting a snapshot of our audience and the roles and organisations that are involved with us. The questions in the survey were designed by our team and featured a mix of multiple choice answers and some free-form text areas so that people could accurately describe their experience. Next slide, please. So the initial responses from that survey gave us an indication of what users tend to actually want on the website and how and when they access it. Combined with the likes of our Google Analytics, we now had a little bit of a snapshot of the quantitative and qualitative data. Next slide, please. So we've only had 11 respondents to the survey, but in this kind of research, quality is more important than quantity most of the time. But we will be continually updating all of our findings from the workshops and the surveys, and we'll be publishing them to the website project wiki, which is on Notion. Next slide, please. So following on from that information and some of the discussions we'd had from Hoffy, we worked with them to split the user types into a few subgroups. After a couple of revisions of splitting and conjoining ones, we settled on 5 key archetypes. So that is chiefs, which are the top decision makers who deal with organizational change. Leaders, who include the heads of departments, directors, things like that, wherein they make critical decisions, but usually specific to their department. Managers, who either manage teams or departments themselves. They're often close to being like on the ground, and they do things like reviewing performance and things like that. And then finally, deliverers, which are involved in the day-to-day delivery, and that can be things like project management. And then obviously, last but not least, us, the staff who work in CDPS. We use the website too. We've got to be part of this as much as our audience does. And I will now hand over to Hoffy.
Thanks, Josh. So I guess with regards to where we came into the project and the findings so far, I'll take you through a brief kind of overview of what we've done with CDPS in particular. So it hopefully then makes sense how we then got to the findings. So I guess initially, before we've kind of done the user research, we always run what we call an acclimatise workshop, which is really to get a sense of the scope of a project and to get up to speed with regards to what's taken place already. As you've seen, CDPS have already kind of done an online survey. There's a Trello board with lots of thoughts and thinking around how the website could be improved and what the problems of the website were. So we wanted to run that initial acclimatise workshop with the broad project team, And we were asking them both specific questions about the website as well as CDPS as a whole. And I think it's important to realise, as I'm sure many of you do, that the experience that someone has of a organisation's website is not something that is just out of the blue. It's kind of part of a journey, or it's part of a kind of process that someone comes into contact with you. So it could be from, I guess, a social media post, or it could be directly from an email or a newsletter as such. So the Acclimatise workshop was very much about getting to know CDPS, questions such as what are CDPS and what are we not, who make up CDPS, and then a bit more specifically about the kind of outputs and content CDPS do, moving on to what are the strengths of CDPS. And it was kind of important for us to take this baseline so we could then be informed within the questions that we were going to then ask users moving forward. Can you change it to next slide, please? Thanks. So I think from that initial kind of body of work, one of the really interesting elements of this work is that that came out of that kind of workshop is that I think out of all of the people we've worked with over the decade and a half that we've been around, CDPS has the most obvious potential customers. And there's 233 of them in total. And it's kind of a really good, it's a kind of problem that, and the major problem that came up from the workshop was that if, for example, those 233 people came the next day and said, we want to work with you, CDPS wouldn't have the capacity to do that, because obviously you guys are a relatively small organization within the context of that. So we're kind of looking at that point, you kind of start thinking about how, in effect, CDPS can add value through other outputs, and in particular the website. So we've kind of got that baseline for the project, and then we decided to then we kind of moved into our initial workshop with a broader team, and some of you guys are here this morning as well, so thanks for coming again. And we worked through that with an exercise with CDPS staff to explore how they saw them or their department might use the website, and therefore from that kind of get a sense of the requirements they may need to actually kind of to be able to fulfill that task. Built on that with the user workshop from the internal staff, the objective was to get a sense of the department's needs, and then obviously the functionality of the site would then follow from that. For others, though, that were maybe a bit more kind of either new to CDPS or wanted to take it from another approach, we asked them to make personas and to step that person through the CDPS experience within the context of that user. And I guess within this work, the main things that we identified were three parts that we needed to explore further. One of the big parts of the people who made personas within this process all spoke about jobs, careers, and kind of talking about making the website have a sense of the culture within CDPS. So providing an idea of who the people are behind CDPS, what are they working on and how they're working on to help with recruitment and help engage with jobs and careers moving forward. We also had members of the skills team who are in very early stages of setting up and running Campus Digidol. And we realized that we didn't have enough time in the hour-and-a-half workshop that we'd run to really understand exactly their needs. So we'd need to kind of follow that up and understand their process and their plans for the future. And finally, although we kind of spoke to the internal users, we really needed to understand external users a bit more. And because we'd identified the 5 groups that Josh has alluded to with regards to the presentation before, we decided to divvy those up and try and make contact with those groups as well. Can you pop next slide, please? Thanks. So in terms of the user interviews, which are still ongoing, I think we've held around about 5 so far, with around about 2 or 3, maybe 4 taking place after in the next few days. We kind of ran them. We provided options for running in Welsh or English, and we did offer face-to-face as well as video calls. Although nearly everyone has so far has taken video calls. And as I said, we'd broken down the users into these main groups. And we've managed to, I believe, get at least 1, if not 2, in each of those groups to kind of interview and take through. And we've involved people in the calls that had knowledge of CDPS and have worked with them, have knowledge of CDPS but haven't worked with them, and have not heard of CDPS and have not worked with CDPS. I think it'd probably be hard not to have heard of you but have worked for you. But anyway, because we felt it was kind of important for us to kind of break down those areas. And some of the slides we've got on display now are some of the kind of feedback that we're getting. So if you want to go on to the next slide, that'd be great. Now, in terms of the questions themselves, we didn't want to just concentrate on specifics of websites, because in our experience, it can often kind of degenerate into kind of like negativity, and it can be very much about it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. And because we also wanted to understand what the possibilities were for this project. So some of the questions, the broad themes were divided into 3. The first bit being, what does CDPS do well that needs to be shouted about? The second is exploring the idea of consumption content. So when does someone actually consume content? So is that on the bus? Is that on the commute? Is that at lunchtime? How long do they have for that? So depending on the level of user they are they provided actual time to learn and take that content in? Is that something their department allows them to do that? Or is it more that they have to do it on their own time? And then there's also a conversation about what type of content that they might actually engage with more. So is that text? Is that video? Is that audio? And then the third section of questions, which is also a bit to do with what Josh is working on at the moment, specifically with regards to the brand of CDPS moving forward, is getting a much more broader set of questions about what excites them about providing public services, and also what scares them in that context. If you want to move on to the next slide as well, please. Thanks. And so with regards to the actual findings so far, obviously, as I said, we're still doing some of these interviews, but the interesting things that we've kind of come up to at the moment, we'd kind of roughly divide into 4 areas. Those being navigation structure, communications, value, and context. And it's become clear from the responses we've had so far that that back up some of the original findings that that CDPS have done on the original survey, is that the website itself is difficult to navigate, or more accurately, it's difficult to find specific content. And this is generally due to a lack of refinement options, such as search and filtering. The second avenue is communications. And it's not, a lot of people have mentioned that it's not 100% clear from the website what CDPS actually does, and so they believe that needs improving. And then part of that has kind of come with, there's an element of it's hard to find outputs within projects. And it seems like outputs from the people we've interviewed so far are looked on as favourable. They're looked on as a value, and sharing value seems to be quite important within teams, within these organisations. So I guess it's like, you know, this is what these guys have done with these people, therefore that's kind of showing that value. And by all means, we understand that process and things like that are important for people, but there's still this kind of old school feel of look at the output, look what they've done, this is what they've made, this is the value they could bring. And the third one is actually value, and it's looking at how the web, it's hard for highlighting product, it's hard to find products and outputs that CDPS are involved in that they could kind of almost take off the shelf and kind of start using. So one of the people who we've interviewed is specifically talking about, are there projects out there that are standardized that can help and be repeated across 233 organizations that could be, CDPS could be involved in. Next slide, please. And then finally is content. It's a bit of a similar one to the first one, but it's much more around the content fitting to the user. The site currently has very little ability to house content around a subject. I guess the nearest we get is the projects pages where we've then got kind of blog links underneath. I believe one of the user research, one of the interviews mentioned that as being death by links, because they ended up just getting lost within a series of links. So there needs to be a way of maybe collating or kind of collecting about topics and themes and areas around a project, and then providing, obviously showing the differences in those offers. So maybe blog post resources, outputs, that kind of thing. And then there's also a question within content and value and realism as well. There's also a question about, there's a slight disconnect between the existing kind of quality of imagery within the website at the moment. I guess it came out initially within some of the surveys where there's use of stock imagery to kind of like fill some of the pages. And I think that kind of also kind of leads this question of whether this content is for them. It feels highly polished in some ways, but then unfinished and kind of like in progress, work in progress type of content as well. So as mentioned, we're not entirely finished on the research part of the process, and our next phase is kind of correlating what we've gone through, including the ones that we're going to go through, and we've produced to help inform, and these will help us inform requirements and functionality, which we'll be doing over the next few days. Next slide, please.
And I think that takes it back to me.
Over to James.
So yeah, thank you. So so we haven't finished discovery yet. We are still in discovery, and as Julian says, all the findings haven't been fully uncovered yet. But this just a very quick timeline up on the screen there. So we hope to finish our discovery by the 30th of November. To be able to get to that, we need those user research sessions to finish this week, or at least the initial discovery user research sessions to finish this week. We are then going to be doing some refining of the user types and profiles. We'll then be writing user stories to align with those personas, and we'll be prioritizing those user stories. 30th of November, as I said, our discovery then completes. We'll be doing our retro. And then we go straight into Alpha. So Alpha is going to be from, there'll be a sprint plan session on 5th of December. We'll have roughly 2 weeks before we break for Christmas. Our next show and tell, I believe, is going to be the 15th of December. And we hope by the 15th of December to be able to start having some mock-ups and potentially drawings and images of potentially what the site could start looking like. So that is us. So questions, please. Go on, Simon. Yeah.
So we're getting, based on the requirements and the number of people you're talking to with all the externals of what they'd want to find, I can get a feel. It's how much of the other functionalities. So like you've done some work talking to skills and capability team, who are going to say they're probably going to, I was expecting they're going to say they want to be able to to know about the training courses, to book on the training courses, to pay for the training courses, to, you know, their ideal of what they're going to want on functionalities. Have we done enough of, is there an opportunity? Have we got enough of that internally from what our other internal CDPS departments want on functionality?
We've done one internal workshop with everybody from an internal perspective, and skills and capability were there, and then we actually had a follow-on session with skills and capability because they are quite a key customer. But yeah, if there's anybody who yeah, I mean, my suggestion would be that we get the user stories produced, and then we can play that back to everybody. And if there's anybody internal at CDPS who feels that we've missed off, you know, their ask or their need or their requirement, then we can loop back round and pick that up.
Yeah, and because I suppose, you know, I'm thinking through, and you were talking a lot about what the findings were showing. People weren't seeing outputs, outcomes, metrics, and stuff like that. We know many of our other people who want to see this. We've got all different. Yeah, how do we produce our management information to our board? How do we do our quarterly reports into Welsh Government? The things that, you know, operationally I'm very interested in, but actually you could have them up, you know, look at some other good public sector websites that I look at, and you can see all of that on their website. So it's also, you know, what other functionalities are we going to have? And I keep thinking to myself, oh, I'll wait until we get the new website, and I've got to think, well, it's better make sure that I've, you know, you guys are building something that's actually going to allow that to stand up. You know, putting all our policies in the open is an example, one we've just been talking to Oshan about, you know, recently. But if there's never even a page for it to happen, then I'm thinking, oh, I should have probably told you about that, shouldn't I?
Yeah, we're happy to do another workshop, and we can just do one with you, Simon, to get your ideas and your thoughts up on there. Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Myra?
So it's a lovely presentation, and it's really nice to meet you all, and thank you very much. And it's great to see it happening, because obviously I'm a user of the website, and you know, I've been itching for this to get going. So it's lovely to see you doing that, and it's just super. I suppose my question is a little bit related to Simon's. I suppose one of the things I'm thinking about is how much we can make this a very dynamic tool, because you know, we need to be able to update it and keep all the information live and make that as easy as possible for the team. So that's sort of thinking downstream. I'm interested in that, people saying, love hearing about what you're doing. It's great to see all the processes described. It's great to see the working in the open. But what have you actually achieved? What have you actually done? What are the outcomes? And I'm wondering if in our questioning and exploring that issue, if you get a sense of what our potential customers would see as achievements, if you like. I'm kind of interested in that. Do you get a sense of, well, if they'd done that, we would have loved to know. What are the things that we could have done or we could have presented? Because we do know what we've done, but we haven't been bringing it right up to the surface. But I'm interested if you're getting a sense of, when you're talking to users, are people kind of going, well, if they've done that, that would be amazing. Or if I knew they were doing this, I'd be really impressed by that. You know, a sort of, it's a bit of a kind of qualitative, you know, what are our best success stories? What are our customers most interested in us doing? You know, what would be the highest achievements for them? You know, that kind of underlying emotional intelligence, if you like, if you get any sense of that.
Yeah, I'll try and answer that with regards to, you know, as I say, we've only done a few, we're only halfway through those, but I think the ones that seem specifically powerful are anything that's not a one-off case. So meaning that something that could almost be replicated across, you know, so let's say it's councils, and let's say there's a particular standard way of doing something, and you could go in and do it there, and then you could also do it in other councils as well. So I think it's almost, it feels like from some of the interviews we've done so far that a way of helping these organizations not have to repeat mistakes that others have already made. And therefore, in terms of the website's role in that, I guess it's obviously highlighting that there are these projects that potentially have scope outside of the individual project itself. and making sure that there's that learning is up front and kind of available to those groups of people. So I think that's definitely one of them. And I think the harder one to kind of gauge at the moment, but the one that kind of feels really interesting, is the empowerment of groups moving up that ladder. So from the deliverers to the managers to the leaders up to the chiefs, and kind of CDPS almost shouting about the idea of a way of working and a way of getting results through this kind of new process. And then being there, and these people can kind of point to you guys and say, well, this is kind of like the way we should be working, and therefore we should maybe give it a go. So I think those two areas feel like they're kind of potentially the places that CDPS potentially have most scope, I would say.
That's really helpful and really interesting. Thank you.
I think I know what you're going to say, Simon. Knowledge banks. But yeah,
I
go on.
Well, I was going to pick up on something that Dweud said now about the presentation about inheriting. Like I apologise for SharePoint, I suppose I ought to apologise for this, but I didn't know any better. You know, this is what I built. I registered the URL and got somebody to build me a web page. And it's been what we've stuck with. But one of the big things that did, and the reason I say that is because one of the bits we really wanted right from day one was some sort of knowledge. It was called this knowledge hub, and it was exactly that. It was this repository, this almost like this, you know, we were trying to think, how do you get to an indexed repository of information? So I want a good example of a digital strategy that works in a local authority or a health board or a Welsh Government department. Now, we've bounced those sort of problems around so much across us as a management team and as an organisation, because you end up with a cookie cutter and we'll just see 22 digital strategies all looking the same. They actually have no real meaning. And we actually think that we're actually diminishing the value that those organisations can do. But we've still got a lot of stakeholders and some key stakeholders out there saying, I wanted to look on your website and I wanted to find an example of a digital strategy template, or I wanted to find an example. And the one I often then refer back to is I keep going to look at GDS, gov.uk, you know, the gov.uk stuff. I just Googled it now, top hit, building digital service platforms and what would they look like, and creating and making it easy. Now, do we just point the whole of the Welsh public sector to that? Because actually we're saying, well, why would you do anything else? Or do we take that page and we stick a dragon on it and we say, there we are, there's good practice? And we've still got all of that as well to do about what it is we're going to try and do with this website in that idea. So it's not just, we've got to think how we're going to use it as a tool for us to deliver what our purpose is, which is to help to support, to hold the hands of those 233, 236 plus all the Welsh Government departments, you know, hold their hands in to deliver better public services.
Even just having a repository where you could search through all the the retros and lessons learned, I think would still be, really powerful.
I think one of the things that I'm loving about kind of the user research is it's not just, as Julian referred to, this isn't right for the website, that isn't right. It's flagging up other things across the organisation that we need to look at as well, and some processes. So one of the things that's coming out is around the fact that, where's the learning? And I think that's something that we're really struggling working with partner organisations to actually allow us to tell the good, the bad and the ugly. And there's a real nervousness there, but that's the stuff people want so they don't make the same mistake. So yeah, there's stuff that's going to be useful for the website, but I think, there's lots of delivery managers and that on this call as well, stuff that's going to be useful across the piece that will maybe lead to other little bits of work for us to look at as an organisation. Simon, to your point about, corporate and things like that, I think, we need to make sure that the new website is going to be, I suppose, meeting everybody's needs, but we do have to start small as well, because you know, if you look at kind of where we are to where we want to be, there has to be something in between. So it's almost that stepping stone as we see it. But whatever we end up with has to be able to future-proof us so we can spring off that kind of step, if you like, so we're not starting from scratch again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's building something that we know. I think it's Josh who says, you know, as long as we're allowed, we can iteratively build. We know the platform we put in place can scale with us. That's the important thing to get right, and then we can build on it from there. So that goes back to that thing that we drowned in GitHub because none of us actually knew. We had this organization externally trying to build us a GitHub repository, and then we just didn't know how to make that available to a Welsh public sector who never heard the word Git, you know, GitHub or whatever that is.
Hello. So yeah, so that's us. Any more questions from anybody?
Yeah, final one from me, James.
Oh, go on. Yeah.
When are we going to have our lovely, wonderful, beautiful, amazing, evidence-based, outcomes-focused service offering new website?
In March.
March? Phenomenal. Great. Brilliant.
And you'll see it before then because, you know, well, I mean, we'll have some, hopefully we'll have some visuals before Christmas. So at the next show and tell, you can start seeing what the sort of, you know, structure will start looking like. And then, yeah, through January and February, we'll actually have, you know, a site up and running. We'll probably keep it hidden somewhere, but we'll be able to pass the URL out for folks that we need to be able to look at it and give feedback on. And yeah, we'll keep iterating through to end of March.
Can I just check this? Are you getting any constraints from the technical build side because of where we sit on the government gel and all that stuff, or is that all manageable with what we're trying to do?
So we do have them on side, but and we do have, you know, you're right, we do have the gel standards. Hoffi have sort of worked within the gel standards before, but remember the gel standards, you know, if we can prove that there's a better way, you know, of displaying something or having a page working, then, you know, the gel standards, they can be updated, but you just have to have a reason as to why you think the way of displaying that information is better than what they have. Yeah, we do have them. We haven't done any huge workshops with them because we don't actually have anything to, you know, to show yet. We don't have what pages, you know, layout structure will be, etc. yet. But yeah, we do have them as an area to talk to more with.
Don't lose sight of the fact that learning, or that there'll be other Welsh public sector organisations who would very much like us to take on some of those battles, and understanding and how we can actually, you know, you can work within and you can then come up with something that works for you as an organisation and still satisfy what your Welsh Government website police may want.
Well, Josh.
I'll just come in on that point, Simon. So with the GEL standards, it's a case of us discussing it in a bit more detail. So when we start getting closer to visualizations of this, of what this website's going to be, you know, past like the kind of wireframe and basic functionality models, that's where I'm going to be working closely with Hoffi and the rest of the web development team to basically dig down into how far can we push this boundary, what can we you know, adapt to, and what can we, you know, fight back against. And yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. I've made some notes already based on what I've read on the GEL standards, but yeah, that's definitely an interesting bridge to cross.
Nathan's team and all that would be, you know, Hoffi may have probably worked with that team, but that central web team in Welsh Government, I'm sure, will be willing to be involved right as soon as they can be.
Anything else from anyone? Oh, okay. Well, thanks all for your time. Yeah, next one, 15th of December. So yeah, thanks everybody, and yeah, hopefully we'll have some diagrams and some visuals to be able to show at the next one. So thanks everyone.
Well done.